Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too much at all.
Welcome to Too Much with Denise Love Hewitt. My dog is making an appearance, so if he pops his head up, just give Tokyo your love. He's right, my sweet little bunny. I've been waiting for him to say hello. He's usually seated quietly right next to me, but today he's front and center. Today, I have the immense pleasure of bringing Amina Zamani to the podcast. Amina is a dear friend of mine who is doing some really amazing work making neuroplasticity commercial, I guess is how I'd like to think of it. And today we're going to focus on some specific things around the brain that we all need in the times we live in. So let me read you her magnificence and then we'll get into it. Amina Zamani is a neuroplasticity specialist, which integrates elements of behavioral neuroscience and psychology with somatic awareness and coaching to create deep identity level change. Amina has spent over 4 years intensively studying neurolinguistics and conducted research in the cognitive psychology department at UCLA. Her focus lies at the intersection of behavioral change, performance coaching, and the mind-body connection, activating the emotional and cognitive systems needed to clear internal conflicts and reshape neural pathways. She has worked with prominent leaders at Fortune 500 companies, including Meta, LinkedIn, Cisco, as well as best-selling author, presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, and a renowned medical professional who works with Tony Robbins. And she's also coached Hollywood celebrities. She speaks regularly at global companies and entertainment organizations such as Live Nation. She has been featured in CBS, Lifestyle Magazine, and USA Today, sharing her mission to make mental health accessible and to help people everywhere understand that they have the power to rewire their own brains. Her heart is in helping others realize they are not broken. They are rewritable. Thanks for being here.
First of all, can I just say I love this podcast idea. I think you are absolutely fucking amazing. So, like, any moment to support the Denise Love Hewitt experience is enriching for me. Yeah.
I mean, it's enriching for me. I mean, poor Amina, when we became friends, I got really jazzed about her work and then would just call her with all sorts of questions about the brain and how to make people really understand the capacity we all have. And so it's been such a joy to witness you grow your business. She's doing a lot more public speaking now than ever and expanding her scope to really reach as many people to give them the tools. And the times we live in, we need the fucking tools. Every day I'm like, what can I add to the toolkit? Because we're all just like gripping, white knuckling. And so before we even get into how your work can apply to supporting us daily in this environment, let's just start at the very basic for someone that's hearing this and is like, neuroplasticity, what the fuck? What does that even mean? Because these are big words that are not commonly used in our vernacular. So can you just give us a very kid-friendly understanding of what it is that you do?
Yeah, neuroplasticity is a big word, but if we break it down into two chunks, neuro is your mind and your brain. And plasticity is this idea of moldability, right? If something's plastic, it's bendable, it's moldable. So, neurologically, we've talked about this, it wasn't until the later 1940s, 50s that we even discovered our brains were neuroplastic. And so we haven't been able to figure out all regions of the brain. But what we know today is that we can rewire our brain at any age. And that's the
How did
crux
we
of,
even find out our brains were plastic?
oh my goodness, exactly. Like, it's such a good question because actually, like Darwin theory and all the psychologists didn't understand the mind body connection. You know, I want to answer your question by giving you a statistic because I fucking just love data and I love numbers. But basically, like, we've been studying the nervous system and the mind and the brain forever, right? Since the 1800s. We discovered in 1940 that it's neuroplastic through some fucked up experiment. And we're just now in the last 10 years discovering that your positive thinking can change your brain, that you speaking nicely to yourself can rewire your brain. So basically, like, to answer your question, in order to rewire your brain, just talk to yourself the way you would your best friend. And that explains neuroplasticity at the most basic level.
Now that we have the base layer understanding, we're living in a time with fascism breathing down our necks, and we're living in a time where every day there's an onslaught of challenging news that's affecting real people's lives, and it feels like a lot to metabolize. I'm someone, I like to be informed, so ignoring the news is not an option for me. Not being consumed by the news is. But I think we could all use some really key tips around how to keep ourselves regulated in a world that today is hard enough to keep regulated when the news cycle is mundane. When you have daily shakeups, what can we do with our brain, work with our brain so that we do not get overwhelmed or stuck in a surviving self or a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response?
It's interesting, like the fight, flight, freeze response is broken up into two segments, really, of our autonomic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so, what we want to do is recognize when each is activated. So, for example, that's the hardest piece about trauma. You actually don't know that you've had a trauma response until it's over. That's what's so
Interesting.
yeah, so it's very, very, very difficult for somebody to be like, speak up or don't have that reaction because your brain actually needs 3 hours to come down from that cortisol flush in your brain. So like when we're constantly taking in an information, and for brilliant people like you that process really fast, it can start dysregulating one's nervous system because your neuroreceptors connect really, really quickly and can make meaning and can make meaning and can make meaning. And so when our brains are meaning making machines, it can fuck us. So we actually need to recognize that for people as intelligent as you that can process such information, we need to decrease our sensory load. If you read 3 articles, read 1. That's the very first thing, is exposure to that stimulus. I'm not saying don't be informed. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying like take a break and then go back to it.
Okay, so say, for example, say I'm on a day where it's just a lot
Yeah.
of crazy news. I'm reading
Yeah.
it. I want to know what's going on. Do you suggest that, like you're saying, the 3 hour come down? Is it something
Yeah.
where, okay, go for a walk, work on stuff, and then take that 3 hours to get yourself back into stasis? How do I know that
Yeah.
I'm regulated?
Well, the fastest way to know that you're regulated is actually just to do what psychologists suggest, which is like, what do I see around me? Name 3 things you see around you. Okay, I see white walls, I see brown, I see paintings behind me. And then what are 2 things you can touch? I can touch my arms, I can touch my
Mm.
thighs, I feel the ground underneath. And then what do you smell? Attaching your senses is the fastest way to come back to present.
So it's really just we can get regulated more quickly when we're in presence.
Absolutely. You nailed it. That was a genius uh, tying
So
together. Like,
interesting.
yeah.
Because a lot of what I've been talking about just intuitively in the times we live in
Yeah.
is right now it's important to slow down. It's important to be incredibly present because we don't know what's going to happen day to day and we can't hypothesize in the future and waste our life force energy. That's not a good avenue for resistance. For us to resist effectively, we have to stay really clear and really grounded and really present because otherwise you'll spiral. That's a
Right.
lot of what I've just been intuitively trying to do is just take it day by day,
You're
breath
right.
by breath, see what sticks, see what falls away. And
You're
so
right.
that's really helpful to know that really it's as simple as, okay, I'm feeling high cortisol, dysregulated. I can tell I'm off. Just come back to center. What's in front of me? What am I feeling? What
What
am I
am I
smelling?
feeling? Yeah. If you can take your right hand and just put it on your heart and just take 6 deep breaths, that starts producing oxytocin in your brain. And keep doing
And
it.
are we
Yeah.
exhaling longer than inhaling?
No
Okay,
rules.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, because
Just inhale, exhale. But it's the touch, it's the somatic experience that matters more.
but when we exhale longer, they say that's also a good way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
It is, but in this case, it doesn't matter as much because when you do box breathing, the exhale matters. But in this case, just keep going and feel the pressure of your hand on your heart. And now add your favorite temperature and add your favorite smell.
And my
Yeah.
favorite doggy on my leg.
Your favorite doggy on your leg. Yeah, just like that. It takes
Yeah,
75 seconds.
I feel great.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good. You look
everyone,
great.
you're going to try this. Unbelievable. I've had such a busy back-to-back day, and I'm like, whoo, this feels great. Okay. Remember the slowing down. That's a really good, it's a really good tip. Now, say I'm someone, I'm not going to name names, but I might know someone like this that is addicted to the news cycle. And also not just the news cycle, the conspiracy theory tunnels, the cuckoo kachuku. We're going deep on the conspiracy theory. Like, I need to get you out of there. We don't know if that's true. Stay with me here in the present, but they feel very far gone on either
Yeah.
side. Doesn't matter. It's not about sides, it's about humanity. But the point
Yeah.
is, how do I reach that person and say, regardless of what your beliefs are, this is not good for you? How do I reach them? What is a good, besides the
Mm.
slowing down of breath? Is there another tactics? How
Yeah.
do I maybe connect with them and explain to them what they're doing to their brain?
How do you reach the far reaching people? Well, the very first thing we want to discover and understand is if communication is redundant, it's the response that we elicit, period. So if
Wait, say that one more time. It's powerful.
communication is redundant, it doesn't fucking matter what I say. It's how it lands with you. It's the response that you elicit that matters. So I could be saying something, and if it's not landing with you and it's not eliciting the response I want, I need to change my approach, right? But we live in a society and politically where we're taught to bow down to people talking at you because that's significant, that signifies power. And so our entire nervous system is associated and anchored to obedience. And so when you have tremendous stimulus, we just go, oh, and that's the freeze. That's the freeze response. And so when people are so into looking at all the areas, what they're looking to is either to find safety, right? Look for the exit, whatever, to find some kind of safety or meaning, because our brains are meaning making machines. And so if they can recognize what they're actually trying to do, the motivation behind their actions, I think they would find additional regulation.
Interesting. The motivation piece. The news cycle feels to me like it's become another mechanism for numbing. Many people, they seek drinking, they seek romance, they seek TV, they seek different ways of turning their brain off or numbing themselves or disassociating from what's happening. I feel like the news cycle is now in that space where people are using it as a way to escape or disassociate instead of really processing what they're reading or what they're engaging with. We're in this very reactive state, just politically, everyone on either end. And we've lost the ability to have constructive discourse or curious conversations with people that have differences than us. And is there something that's happened? And is social media played a part of what's happening to our brains that there's less space for
Yeah,
that level of curious
yeah,
conversation?
yeah. It's a really good question. And it's a very relevant question. Like, what's happening for us emotionally and neurologically? When we have tremendous grief and emotionality that hasn't been processed, our bandwidth to hold additional information, particularly new information, that may cause additional friction in the back part of our brain, in the limbic center of our brain, we get more and more sort of jumpy and hypervigilant. And so, what's
Mm,
going on in our brain is that we have this is a very, very, very relevant question. We have so much stimulus that's unprocessed that our capacity to digest has decreased significantly. So, when you look
wow.
at energy management theory and you look at the athletes, the Olympians, the top performers, right? They are exposed to additional stress often, right? More achievement, more, but they're given equal and more amounts of rest. So let's think about that for a fucking second.
Interesting.
Yes, this is very, very, very critical to changing our mind and our brain. So it's good. You should expose your brain to additional stress. You should fucking do things that scare you, right? But you need equal, if not more, amounts of rest for that to take place. You think a fucking Olympian doesn't, they sprint for 30 seconds, they rest for 10 minutes. Then they do it
Right.
again and they do it again. And so we have to do that neurologically, but we're so overloaded. Our the back part of our brain is so inflamed that our logic center actually shrinks. We don't even have access to our logic, and our emotions will always trump logic. Always, 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 always. Your brain is 3 times more likely to avoid risk than to seek reward.
Wow. So this directly correlates to resilience.
Totally.
And that explains why we're becoming a less and less resilient culture. Because if we don't allow
Exactly.
ourselves to A, rest and process, but if we have low bandwidth and if our logic center is this small, we don't have the capacity to go
Yeah,
take the big risk because we're overwhelmed.
we're overwhelmed. Yeah. And we make ourselves wrong for that overwhelm. So then that causes more overwhelm.
Yeah.
Because,
We're
yeah,
not that old, but like growing up, I had a landline. That's how
yeah,
it was. People call
yeah,
the house, pick
yeah,
up the phone.
yeah.
Internet started when I was like, I guess 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere along there. And so there was a world in which my dad came home from work and that was it. 6 p.m., 7 p.m., dinner, didn't work until the next day, then went to the office. There was no checking your email past 5 or 6 p.m. That didn't exist. The level of connectivity we have is a gift because we can have friends far away from us and let them know how much we care about them. We don't have to wait for a letter to travel 3 weeks for them to receive that thought and wish.
Right,
But
right.
think about this all the time, which is you had inherent built-in downtime to your workday. And now
Exactly.
with the evolution of the internet technology, you're
Right.
never not working.
Yeah, exactly.
And you feel
It's
guilty
it's
if you didn't check the email.
right.
And so like direct response to that,
Yeah.
I changed how I started working and living a couple years ago. And one of the
Wow.
things that became a non-negotiable for me was number one, the ultimate luxury in life is a slow morning, honey. Let me tell you, I love
Yeah.
Amina gets up at like 4 a.m. I don't do that. I love a slow morning. I love a languid morning. I love, oh, I'm in bed for the next hour doing email.
Luxury.
Luxury. I find that to be very rooting for me and still for me. The same thing is that I now, if I'm not crazy busy, a walk has become a very significant part of my day as well. I don't walk daily these days, but it's a part of my week. It's a non-negotiable part of my week to have that brain space where it's just me and my dog walking, and it helps so much with the generation of creativity. But I want to talk about stillness and how important that stillness is, or the slowing down is,
Yeah.
to not only support ourselves but support our
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. Yeah. Basically, If we want to regulate our nervous system, we need stillness. Like, we need it. There's just no way you can rewire your brain. I mean, if you don't want to rewire your brain, be fucking busy all the time. There's no way that you can actually access and rewire your brain without stillness. Neuroplasticity happens through rest. You can activate changes, you can do the deep work to unlock your pathways, but you need to go rest after for the pathways to connect, right? Your brain is an organ. So it needs time to rewire and reset constantly. Let's just like actually think about that for a second. Just that statement. That's so fucking powerful because you talk to me about stillness. Your brain, it's an organ. It's a software system, so it can take a lot in. But neuroplasticity happens through rest. So anytime I work with somebody and kind of do an intense neuroplasticity experience, I want them to have nothing else planned. We schedule a massage for them, my team will. We make sure that the entire evening is just for them. And somebody might say, I don't have 6, 8 hours, Amina. Well, you know what? Maybe you don't. But what's the alternative? Being emotionally overloaded, completely dysregulated, right? Like my thesis is do the work twice a month. Give yourself the entire evening. God forbid you give yourself the entire evening of being still.
But what was your statistic you gave me? There was like an ROI on the time spent that you had figured out. So if you spend X amount of time every month working with you, there was a percentage that you got back that showed you like how powerful this tiny time allotment was for the
Yeah.
reward.
I did some numerical modeling and tested it against performance in executives. And then I matched it with some Harvard studies. And basically, the long and the short of it is like you give 1% of your year into your personal development, and the return is 4x. Like,
Crazy.
and not just in numerical performance, which of course we see, but through emotional intelligence, through relatability, through convergent thinking, through your capacity to hold presence, which is really the thesis of this entire podcast in a lot of ways, is to be present with the totality of who you are and be able to absorb that in the face of opposition.
So if I'm really not ready to shift that much and I'm very busy, what is a very small way for you to start building rest into your schedule? Is there an easy way that you have found that people who are not comfortable with it get comfortable with it?
James Clear talks about this all the time in his Atomic Habits book, right? And he says a lot of times we optimize for efficiency. And so when we go to the gym, we want to work out for 90 minutes and get the best workout possible. And there was a guy that used James Clear's 2-minute rule and he lost 100 pounds just by going to the gym for just 2 minutes,
Oh my
fucking doing
gosh.
a couple of stretching, and then getting the hell out because his brain got accustomed and got into the habit of just getting to the gym first before he started working out. And so training our brain is very, very critical. So what I tell people is if you can meditate for 3 minutes a day, it's better than 30 minutes once a week. Don't do it. The brain loves consistency and it doesn't like intensity. Your brain does not like
Daily
intensity.
maintenance.
Daily motherfucking maintenance. Daily maintenance. I'm telling you, put it on your calendar for 2 minutes a day. Just 2 minutes a day, breathe. You don't have to be perfect. People say, oh, I don't know how to meditate. It's like, you don't have to meditate perfectly. You know, I've been meditating for basically like half my life. And my thoughts are still rampant and crazy, but I don't do it to shut my thoughts down. I do it for how the fuck I feel afterwards, which is centered, relaxed. My capacity expands. That's all I want to do in life, you know?
Selfishly, I like knowing that when you meditate, You still get crazy thoughts. It's like, whoop. Okay, good. Not alone. Love that. Love that for us.
Yeah,
The other thing I think that's actually a really simple thing that I started doing after doing a session with you was we had worked on a new belief for me or a new association. And
yeah,
I created a daily affirmation that I'd have
yeah.
repeating every single day in my calendar.
Wow. Yeah,
So
yeah,
every day
yeah,
when I look
yeah.
at my to-do list, it's there at the bottom.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
read and look at it every day. And then that's a great way of passive neuromaintenance. Like I do other things that are more active daily maintenance because I think it's really important to feed your brain what you
Yeah.
want it to believe and see in the world.
Mhm.
But that was one that's for someone that's very resistant to the idea of taking time. That doesn't take any
Yeah.
time. That
Yeah.
takes, it's just there, it exists, and I feel the difference.
No, but there is a distinction with that, Denise. And the distinction is you had an emotional connection to having a neuroplasticity session. So it was anchored in your body and in your mind. So it means something. That's very, very
Right.
critical. Is that if we say affirmations and they don't feel true, they're not going to feel true, but you have no association or anchor to it, it actually can have an adverse effect. And
Interesting.
so what we want, right? I've seen examples where people have said like affirmations that they weren't ready for and they started to feel more afraid. I've seen it
Mm.
where they were like, maybe they've had some real trauma around visibility and they're like, I can be seen, I can be seen, I can be seen. And then they say it and they feel like, it can actually, again, communication is redundant. It's the response that you elicit. If you're trying something and it's not eliciting the response that you want, try something else. But like in that case, you had a very important emotional experience. You were like, yeah, we did that session. After that, incredible. And like, I can't believe you still have it on your calendar. I'm so impressed. That's so
We're
good.
committed to the bit.
Yeah,
We're committed. I'm committed. I'm in. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm not forgetting that feeling. When I did have some doubt, I went back to the feeling that I had. There was something I felt when I did this with Amina that I go back to that feeling to remember it. But the affirmation helps. So without someone doing, say, a full blown session, what is a way that we can start to believe the affirmation we want?
It's a really hard it's a really hard thing, right? I think that there's a lot of people that will say a lot of things around just do it this way and do it that way. And then, if you don't do it this way, you're broken or whatever. Like, but what research and science has shown are these three things. And so this is what I might suggest. Our emotions are the fastest way to create a picture in our brain. So when you have emotionality into something, it can create a vivid picture and it can then attach other senses like sounds and feelings and smells, right? So if we want, like neuroscientifically, if we want to better experience that which we desire, connect your senses to it.
Okay.
Be able to really connect your senses to it. Maybe you might feel it, but if you keep doing it, it starts to get clearer and clearer and clearer, right? Like your brain actually doesn't know the difference between imagined and perceived. Do you know that study of the basketball players that scored? Do you know? Should I
Enlighten
share
the
it?
audience.
Okay. I uh there were two basketball teams in a university, and they did an experiment to see who would have better scores at the end of this 30-day experiment. And what they found is that they asked one group to just practice shooting hoops for 30 minutes. They asked another group just visualize shooting hoops for 30 minutes. Now, the group that actually practiced increased their performance by 26%. Now, the group that didn't practice, that just visualized, like for 30 minutes, making the hoops and practicing, they improved by 24%.
Wow.
So, actually, this is like the easiest fucking thing, and it's so hard to make time to begin to visualize that which you desire. Because, a lot of times people say, I got to see it to believe it, but your brain needs to feel, like your heart, your body, you need to feel it to even make a picture of it. And if you can do that, you're well on your way to building neuroplasticity, to creating this thing called neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is this idea of building new pathways that were never there before. It's like little weeds sprouting in a garden.
So cool.
It's so fucking cool. And you can literally create neurogenesis by setting a timer for 3 minutes and looking in the mirror and feeling something positive about yourself. Like for me, like when I see you, Denise, and your magnificence, I think you are one of the coolest, most influential, creative souls I've ever met. Like you and your capacity to see people is probably the 0.1199% the decimal below one, right? I'm like, it's not even the 1%. You really have that beautiful capacity. And so to be able, like for you to go in front of the mirror and motherfucking set that alarm and say, you have this amazing capacity and I love that about you, right? Like 3 minutes, just, it feels so weird. But
it does feel weird.
Yeah. It does feel weird. There is research about this, right? There was Carnegie Mellon did this research on convergent thinking and research and processing of performance. And they took two teams at I think it was like a Fortune 500 company or a corporation. And they had one team say positive affirmations, positive things that were based on their values, not like I'm good enough and people love me, but based on their values, things that were aligned with their heart and exposed them to a significant amount of stress. The second group had very little stress, but said nothing positive to themselves, just went on their day. At the end of the 30 days, what they discovered is the group that had more fucking stress, more intensity, but said the positive things to themselves performed 50% better on a bunch of markers than the group that was essentially less stressed but didn't say the positive things to themselves. And the main thing was their ability to have convergent thinking, to be able to deduce to one simple answer, to use the left and right hemispheres of your brain, to use your logic and emotional center to come to one conclusion, which requires a tremendous amount of presence. And what they discovered is people could have more presence and more capacity to converge and think if, in fact, they were fucking nicer to themselves and stated it out loud.
So simple.
Oh my God. I'm about coaching and I'm about therapy and I have a coach and I have a therapist and I have a fucking shaman and all the things, right? Like I got it. But yo, like if you want to change your brain, set that fucking alarm for 2 to 3 minutes.
Change how you talk to yourself.
And change how you talk to yourself.
I used to just every time I would be in a low, I would just attack how I look. I would attack my body and I just stopped. I just finally was like, would I tell my friend that? What would I do to my friend? I'd be like gassing her up. I would be hyping her up. I'm not telling her she looks like shit. Like I would never ever in the history of time. And so now I catch myself, right? If that's where my head goes in a depressive moment, I'm like, stop.
Yes. No, exactly. And we're trained to do this. Like the research shows actually when we tear down our bodies and have body image issues, it's so related to belonging, right? Like a lot of researchers looked at body image and the crux of body image is so interesting for the kids that felt like they didn't belong or weren't fully seen as themselves, had stronger body image issues, and they were thinner. And some kids that really felt like they belonged and were seen for who they were, maybe a little chubbier, but didn't have as strong a body image issues. And so it's all about belonging. Body image And tearing ourselves down is just another substitute for needing to be reminded that we matter and we belong.
Woof. If I was a parent, this would be the number one thing I'd be listening to. It's so simple. It's also simple. It's much harder to do in practice. It's hard to take
For
those 2
sure.
minutes and talk to yourself. But I
Yeah.
really think there's been a theme in this podcast as people talk about how they talk to themselves and how
Yeah.
much they have seen their lives change. It's
Yeah.
such a small thing.
It's such a small thing. And let's even go even more geekier because I know a lot of times people say, well, I don't have trauma. I'm like, babe, if you've been through the pandemic, you have trauma.
Right.
I don't have limiting beliefs. Okay, well, if you have parents, you have limiting beliefs. Let's just.
I'm always discovering new ones. I'm like, oh, interesting. But what's interesting is since I've gotten to know you and understand your work more, is oftentimes what I find is when I'm having conversations,
Yeah.
people will tell me something and I say, I think that's a limiting belief. No, it's true because I find myself now they're communicating to me and I'm like, I don't think that's true. I know that you believe that's true, but I don't think that's true for you. And it's helped me have an awareness of the language to even check myself when I say something and is that my limiting belief? Have I fallen into thinking this thing wasn't possible for me?
Yeah.
And that awareness of language has also been really helpful to check myself, but check the people I love too. We all have these limiting beliefs. They show up all the time in conversation, all the time. My friend texted me the other day and she was like, there's no single healthy, attractive straight men in LA. And I said, I just think that's a limiting belief. I'm like, don't think that's true. Like fundamentally not true. But if you believe that, then that is what you're going to manifest. That'll be real for you. But I don't believe that to be true. It's small stuff, but you start to see where we're limiting our own reality.
Yes, Denise, exactly. And this is why I love being friends with you. Just that. But I want to share something super cool. Like, actually, 40% of our limiting beliefs are inherited. And so when we look at the genetic construct of what happened to us and our imprinting and our coding, typically we will inherit 40% of our parents' fears and limitations. So something to really do that's an easy exercise is to think about what's your mom's biggest fear? And what's your dad's biggest fear? And can you relate to that fear? If in fact you can, like let's
Also
do
done a lot
this
of work
exercise.
around it.
Let's do this exercise right now. Like this will be
Okay.
fun. Okay, so I love that you're so down, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
You're
well,
like, oh yeah,
let's go.
All right, so what do you think your mom's biggest fear is?
I'm speaking for her, so I'm not sure that's her biggest fear, but she has a lot of fear around money stuff.
Okay, got it. Yeah. All right. And then what do you think your dad's biggest fear is?
I think it used to be, for the majority of my life, not achieving his potential.
Got it. Okay. And when you think about your biggest fears?
Not living up to my potential.
Yeah. And I see some emotion there.
It's my absolute biggest fear to be here and want to be of service and not to be able to be of service to the way that I want to be. 2 years ago, I went to the Renaissance tour, saw our Queen Bee on her birthday show, which also happens to be my birthday show because at midnight it's September 5th and Beyonce and I almost share a birthday. And so I went as a birthday gift to myself and I started crying watching Beyonce.
Right.
Because I was like, here we are. How lucky am I to witness someone living to her potential in the highest degree possible, who has manifested her potential to the highest degree possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just in awe because I'm like, wouldn't we all love to do that to the highest degree possible? And grateful to witness that. I sat there and I just spoke to the universe that day at the concert. I said, universe, today's the day. This is what we're going for. We want this. We want this. Okay. I'm off the bench. Put me in the game. This is what I want. It doesn't have to be like Beyonce level crowds, but witnessing it made that very clear for me. And I was emotional about it because it's so rare to witness someone that talented at that level who's also been doing this for the majority of her life and constantly creating expanding and growing as an artist. It's unbelievable. And so that's my biggest fear. I've done a lot of unraveling around the money stuff. The money stuff is not my stuff. I know that now, but I've done work to realize that's not my stuff. I think my dad and I still share a fear.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really, really, really beautiful. And so this is a wonderful example of how we inherit generational trauma through our fears. And so from a spiritual perspective, we hold unconscious contracts with our parents that in order to be connected to them and to be loved, we have to believe what they believe because our mirror neurons will match that, and that signifies connection. And all we're ever seeking is connection and rapport. And so the good news is that we all have inherited trauma, but if we can begin to separate it and say, okay, like that is my biggest fear and that drives me, but I don't have to carry such a heavy backpack. I can take the backpack off and I can empty the backpack with rocks that don't belong to me. And I can include the rocks of my ambition and my magnificence. I could put it in. The backpack can be slightly heavy, but it's got to be mine. If we can start separating and recognizing the intensity of my pressure is my dad's. And then if you want to go a step further, is to start healing that. You can emotionally, I'm not saying you can heal your parents' emotions, so don't get me wrong. But if time is linear and your brain cells, your dad's brain cells are in your brain and vice versa, how could you not change the system? Because if you actually think about it, what's happening here is also happening over there. So
this is the Dance of Anger stuff. If anyone's read the Dance of Anger book, which is when we hold boundaries, especially with our family, right? Because that's where most of our stuff plays out. So when we hold those boundaries, the family has to adhere to the boundary and learn the new dance step, or somebody gets off the dance floor. But how we show up creates a ripple effect of how other people show up, which is why when one person in the family goes to therapy, people evolve by reacting to the one person who now operates differently. They're saying, I'm not going to do this dynamic with you anymore. So you either change the dynamic or I'm going to protect my peace. That's the power of all this work, is that there are these huge ripple effects to changing yourself because it changes how you show up with other people.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You ever spend time with somebody and you feel more relaxed? Because their nervous system is matching your, like we have mirror neurons that constantly, we're co-regulating all the time. And so when we're around people that are at heightened anxiety all the time, it's impossible for your nervous systems to co-regulate. So the dominant person in the relationship will win. And in this case, your dad, you were a baby. He had this belief structure running, and you looked up to him and you loved him, right? So you took on that belief structure to be able to bond. And so it's a natural way for the brain to preserve and survive. The brain needs to make meaning of something. So if dad's doing this, this must be the right way of thinking. I need to do this. Because so much of what we inherit from when we're kids is through body language and through emotions that we don't even understand. This is why it's so fucking critical that when you're pregnant, you speak positively to your belly and play amazing music. Because you can't help the epigenetics that are being transferred, but you can slow it down and stop it through doing your own work. It actually starts with us. It doesn't end with us or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So carrying on this thing with you and your dad, for example. So it's like, like that was my dad's biggest fear. Then you can deconstruct that and say, what was the positive intention for him having this fear? What was the question behind the question? What was the intentionality behind it? And maybe what he was trying to do was have some kind of significance, right? Or to feel important or to be the man. Okay. So he was compensating. I don't know if any of this is true, but I'm just making this up, of a human psyche, right? So
Yeah.
he may have been overcompensating because he was emasculated. And so then he has to assert more dominance and more power and yell or whatever. And
Yeah.
so then he has this intensity to prove himself. And so his kids have to prove themselves constantly. My dad was somebody that was very dysregulated, would just scream all the fucking time.
Yeah.
One time I remember we were all just watching TV and my dad walked in and he said something to me and three of my sisters, and we were glued to the TV. He took the TV, took it out of its socket, went outside, threw the TV away. I was like, oh, what the
Yeah.
fuck just happened, right? He was just like, and then the next week we had a brand new TV. Nobody talked about it. It's like, did that happen?
Yeah.
Nobody talked about it. And so anytime my dad came in the room, we were like, okay,
What's gonna happen?
what's gonna happen? It was such a power move. I can take this away from you and I can bring it back. But imagine how much you have to shrink yourself to fit into a room where someone takes all the oxygen.
Yeah.
So imagine what most kids are doing. Say they don't have a rageaholic dad, for example,
Yeah.
right? Or a highly anxious mother. But somebody says to you, you're not allowed to do that, or why can't you be more like her, or compare you? That can also have a really negative impact on our mind. And so to answer your question earlier of why are we so stimulated and why it's so hard for us to regulate, is because you have these early experiences. And so if they get triggered, they flood our brain and it's impossible for us to regulate. We have up to 60,000 thoughts per motherfucking day. 80% of those thoughts are negative. Over 95% of those thoughts are from yesterday.
Wow.
So when we think about this, like, I'm just thinking the same thought about myself and about her and about him and about them and about whatever on repeat. My brain, this little road of thinking when I was younger became a super highway. And the reason change is so fucking hard is because we're building a new highway on top of an existing super highway.
And
And
also, most of us don't come into the work
right,
until we're older. So there's already these harder coded pathways that
exactly.
then we have to unwire and then make new ones. And that's why the commitment to the daily
Yeah,
wiring, because I don't care how well intentioned of a parent you are, there's plenty of amazing parents who have secure attachment children who have done
right.
quote unquote everything right. Being a
Yeah,
parent means making mistakes. And so
yeah,
that's the part where it doesn't really matter what you come from, whether it's heavy trauma or light trauma, there's still stuff that's been coded that
exactly.
you're not conscious that's being coded because you don't come
Yeah.
into consciousness until later.
That's a very, very good point. And typically it happens after our brains are fully formed. So our
Yeah.
brains are formed by the time we're 25. Our belief structures are implemented by the time we're 7. And so if you think about that, that's so unfair. Like how I feel about myself and my attachment to you or him or her is what was wired at my parents' most fallible period of their life. And that constructs my brain. Thank you very much.
Right.
That constructs my belief structures about what I think about myself. And then what happens is when your brain gets coded by age 7, you go into your teens and preteens and whatever, and it starts to generalize. So this one thought that you have around you're not going to live to your potential also gets generalized into all other areas of your life, for example, and then you might have corollary thoughts of I better not live up to my potential, or I can't live a life if I'm not living to my potential, but maybe I'm not allowed and maybe it's not okay. And so then you just have a ping pong and a ripple of all these negative thoughts that surround the circuitry of your brain. And so, what we actually have to do is recognize. Step 1, recognize, babe, it's not yours. The second thing is to question, what do I want to believe instead? Just that. Wow, my dad had such a whatever belief structure. What do I want instead? And then think about this. What are the three maintenance things I have to do to move toward this positive belief versus the negative belief? What are the three maintenance things I have to do? I know that I have to rest more. I know that I have to show up to my coach every fucking week because addiction is the only disease that tells us we don't have a disease. When I have diabetes, I'm not fucking playing. I know I need my insulin shot. But addiction is the only disease that tells you it's not so bad. And what we are is we are an addicted society. We are addicted to our pain. We are addicted to our anxiety. And so
And we're addicted to numbing.
And we're addicted to numbing because the brain could survive. When we're kids and your dad's yelling at you, and nobody talks to you, or where that fucking TV was thrown away, or like, well, it's easier to go away in this
Right,
moment.
of course.
Right?
It's easier to ignore than to face it, especially then you don't have the same, you're in their house. I challenge this, I'm in trouble. There is less agency.
Right.
What's really important here is that we are not helpless. In the times we live in, many of us politically feel very helpless right now. We are not helpless.
No.
Well, they say it takes 3.5% of the population to preserve democracy. In the whole population that voted, I think it was like 20% or something voted for Kamala. And then a bunch of people didn't vote. There's plenty of people that are on the right side of history that want to preserve democracy. So we are not helpless. It's about how we mobilize and organize and use our voice. And I know it can feel that way, but a big piece of this is rewiring our brains and feeling positive, not negative. We create the reality we want to see. Part of how I did my daily maintenance when I was working through a lot of different issues in my life was listening to spiritual podcasts. I'm not going to lie. Like I would get in my car and I would listen to these really interesting thinkers who were helping me just put different things in my brain. I have the weirdest little, my friend gave me this app. It's a meditation app. It's called the Solfeggio Sounds app. And it's these sounds at different frequencies that are supposed to heal different things in your body. Do I believe in it? I don't know. What I do know is that before bed, I would put on different things and this guy would talk and I would listen. And I still do it for years. And on some level, subconscious level, I'm a different person than I was a decade ago. And it's all the small things. It doesn't have to be, if you're not a meditator, if you're not into yoga, if you don't want to coach, if you don't want to go to therapy, there's ways that you can create something that works for you that makes a difference. There's different modalities for everybody. You can explore what those are, but none of us are helpless. We have far more capacity and personal agency than any of us even know. We still don't even know that much about the brain.
No, we actually don't. We know very little about the brain. And we started studying the nervous system in the 1800s. And it's just now in the last, I would say, since 1980s, that we started to really recognize the intensity of the mind-body connection. Deepak Chopra was a leading thought leader that just said, hey, your emotions impact your body. The dis-ease that we have, dis-ease that we have, it's connected to emotionality. When we look at statistics of like people that have experienced early childhood trauma, if you've experienced 4 instances that were traumatic in your life, that were intensely traumatic, like you are 4.5 more likely to have anxiety. You are 3 times more likely to be hard on yourself. You are 2 times more likely and prone to depression.
What is the correlation to autoimmune diseases?
The autoimmune disease that when I was studying with Tim Halbaum through my certification, he said that really an autoimmune disease is the nervous system attacking itself. So it's doing the inverse of what it's supposed to do, which is to protect you and regulate. I am not a doctor. I can't speak to all of the issues, but in my very limited experience of having worked with people with autoimmune disease, what I've noticed is when they started healing their deep core limiting beliefs and could deeply feel the pain that they'd inherited from their family and give space to feeling that, it dramatically had a shift.
When you're dysregulated or when your cortisol is high, for me with GI issues, I've seen a magnificent,
Yeah,
unbelievable shift. That
right.
still, it still shows up when I'm stressed or overwhelmed. I still symptoms. I'm not healed by any means, but it's a
Yeah.
lot more manageable than it ever was because I'm a lot more in tune with myself.
And being in tune with yourself, I'm so sick of people saying, like, be the best version of yourself. I kind of get that. And of course, we can all be the best versions of ourselves, but that changes, right? Like our cellular memory changes biologically. Like this new best version of myself can be in process.
Most of us are in process many times. Yeah, it's also, we just did a recording that is an interview in process. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but we chose
Right.
to
Yeah.
do an interview about a specific moment. So if you guys tune into Kelly Lamore Wilson's episode, that was by design to not have a clean, neat bow on the conversation. But when we figure it out, she'll be back to tell the rest of the story. But we're just honoring where she is right now and this part of the narrative.
It's so important. And I think you do a really good job at this, is to continually expand your capacity to be present and yourself. Because I think actually what we discover as children is this is the meaning that children make up. Bad things are happening to me. I must be bad. So they blame themselves. And this is globally, universally. This is just the human mind. We blame ourselves. And so we spend the rest of our life trying to prove our brains right of why we're shitty, of why we fucking suck, of why we can't rest. And it's like we have to unlearn all these ways of abusing ourselves because we have a perpetrator out there, which is a parent or society, and then we turn it inwards. And the distinction of emotional sobriety is recognizing when the perpetrator is turned inwards and to stop it. That's it. Dalai Lama said, I fall off balance all the time, but it takes me seconds to get back. All we have to do is remember who we are. There's nothing wrong with us, right? We just had a moment.
It's the most
Come back to
human thing
center.
in the world.
It's just come back to center. And that's why I do a lot of values work with people. Like, who are you really? What do you value? Who is this person that I'm looking at? What is your essence? What do you believe about yourself that's positive? What are your superpowers? How do we deconstruct and decode the positive aspects of your neurology? And how do we map that across to parts of yourself that are hurt?
A lot of the big questions I've been asking recently is trying to give people tools in the support of these times that feel incredibly overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
very helpful to understand how much power we individually have over our own emotional well-being. And then if we can master that, we can really start to bring that into our 3D. The most important takeaway of today is rest. Rest is
Yeah.
not a nice to have, it's a must have. If we care about regulating our nervous system, stillness and rest are the must have.
It really, really matters. Now, you can pace the rest. Even if you look away for 15 seconds at something else when you're looking at a screen, that can shift. We take in so much information through our eyeballs and through, so just closing your eyes for even like 15 seconds can reset. Again, like touching touching yourself. I always, because I work virtually with people and around the world, I always have people anchor their bodies. So touch your gut, touch your belly. Even if you do this and take 3 deep breaths, you can start producing oxytocin. Like, it's the most simplest shit that people are like, that's hokey, that science is now proving, right? Like, neuroscience is now just proving. If you fucking look, if you close your eyes and just focus at the tip of your forehead, just at the tip of your forehead, aka your third eye that India's been talking about for fucking generations. But okay, fine. Neuroscience is now saying if you just close your eyes and focus at the tip of your forehead and just put all of your energy at the tip of your forehead for 11 minutes, you start producing happy chemicals. Okay, so
Wow.
you're telling me that just
Yeah.
focus on my third
15
eye.
seconds to 11 minutes to change your life every day.
Yeah, exactly. Love that. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you for your curiosity. That's the first sign of intelligence is curiosity. And you are such a curious person. And I love that. The other thing is if you can apply that curiosity to your limiting beliefs, just start getting curious. Ooh, do I really think this about
Oh, yeah.
myself? Damn, you know?
It's really helped me to be curious about, especially in my dating life, being an unhealthy attachment person, leaning into curiosity over judgment is
Yes.
a new tool in
Yeah.
the kit.
Yeah.
But it's been helpful to be like, why am I feeling that way? And everything becomes really interesting when you stay in that space in your dating life. And historically, I haven't been able to live in that space because my
Oh,
unhealthy attachment wouldn't allow me to. The stakes always felt too high. There had to be certitude. So living in
yeah.
just this open, curious space has been really fun. And
Wonderful.
it's also been cultivated. That's what I also want to share.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
always a curious person, but my curiosity has grown with my curiosity. It was like I started asking questions, and then I started asking more questions, and I started reading more,
Yes,
and then it begets more curiosity. So
it does. It does. The thing that's so funny is you said it in such a playful way, and you can evoke that play. We need about 25 to 30 reps to learn something for a neuro pathway to connect and actually learn. But actually, if you do it through play, it's 7 to 10.
wow,
One of the things I actually really love about you is I spend probably 90% of my life by default of my job working on very deep sort of emotional things, heavy things with people, helping them change and millions of dollars on the line or whatever. And if you can just play, if you can just be with somebody like Denise that could just make you laugh for like five
Amina
minutes,
really thinks I'm a comedian, but
I know. I think you're so funny. And I told my sister that. And she's like, I know. Denise is really funny. So now you have two sisters that
oh, I love
fully
it.
believe.
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna perform for the Zamani family.
you should. And so that's another tool in your fucking toolkit that's easy that we do naturally as human beings, right? We are drawn to humor, we are drawn to play, but we don't have permission for it. And actually, if you want to learn something, this is why the preschool system that's Waldorf excelled so well is because they teach little kids through play and their
Yeah.
neuroreceptors really connected. So as adults, if we can take moments of play, and one of the best ways to do that is through travel,
Oh
or
yeah.
to do something different. So you want to connect faster, play. You want to have more presence, laugh. You want to
Also,
understand more, meditate. Yeah, go
fighting
ahead.
fascism, make it fun. That's been a big
Yeah,
thing for me. Oh, the
yeah.
resistance has to be fun. So make it playful because that's how we
Wow,
stay, how we create the world we want to see. That's how we neurons
that's
click. That's how we
brilliant.
connect deeper.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, right? Because what we're seeking is we want resistance to turn to respect. And what's the most unifying thing we can possibly do is through entertainment, right? It's through
Yeah.
comedy, it's through connection.
Humor,
So,
joy,
yeah, right.
creativity.
Yeah. Now, I will say my big thesis in fucking life is this to expand and understand your emotions. Because when we don't allow ourselves to feel the pain, we cannot have the joy. It's a
Hmm.
direct correlation, right? But biology suggests this. Like you have a bottle and you have unprocessed grief up to here. Your capacity for joy is limited.
Yep.
And so when you deepen this bottle, when you drink more water, you have more capacity. Now, if you don't want to process your emotions, do cold therapy. That will regulate your nervous system fast.
There's a book
That's
about this. It's called The Upside of Your Dark Side by Dr. Todd Kashdan. And it's all about how embracing our full self and our darkest parts actually equate to
yeah,
greater happiness.
absolutely. This is what Freud was talking about in the early theories of what shadow work is. Shadow work is essentially looking at the parts of yourself, looking at the best parts of yourself and seeing the opposite of that, right? Because sometimes people that are so magnetic and so charming can also be deeply manipulative, right? People that are so giving can also become resentful, right? So we constantly have to look at the flip side of everything, right? Which is why it's so critical for us to do our own internal work. We can just find one limiting belief this week.
Yeah.
Because we have so many. If you want to do some introspection, just think of one limiting belief that you think is stopping you and just start affirming the opposite. I'm not safe to be seen. I am safe to be seen. I don't deserve a loving relationship. I deserve a loving relationship. I can't be successful. I deserve to be successful. Just start repeating that. Hum it to yourself. Fucking write it down on a sticky and just walk by your
Yep.
bathroom. Just attach your senses to it. Spray your favorite perfume and smell it. Because all
Oh,
we're
that's a good
seeking,
one. I deserve to be
yeah,
successful.
yeah, right?
Yeah,
Because the
drink it in.
brain, yeah, drink it in, right? Because the brain is basically a culmination of pictures and sounds. And so we're just seeing a picture, it's evoking an emotion, or we hear a sound and then it elicits a picture, whatever, right? So if you can manipulate that in some way,
Right. Game
try
it.
this.
Gamify it. For those of you that
Yeah.
are always looking for the hack, we got a hack for you.
Yeah. Okay, try this. Think of something that kind of pisses you off.
I have to think. Hold on. I have to think about something that pisses me off.
Politics.
Okay.
Maybe
I
you're
know.
very
I got one.
political. Yeah,
I got one.
yeah. Okay. Don't tell me. Don't tell
I'm
me
not
what
going
it is, okay? Don't tell me. So now close your eyes and get a sense of how close it is to you. In terms of a picture, how big is it? Is it framed? Fill in the colors. Notice if it's moving. And just recognize the intensity of its scale of 1 to 10. Okay? And now kind of shake that off, and then think of something innocuous. Like, did you have breakfast this morning?
Oatmeal.
Oh, no! Okay, good. Do you like it with fruit or without fruit?
No fruit. No fruit.
No fruit. Okay. Oh, wow. I always have to have oatmeal and fruit. Yeah, but whatever. So we're just resetting your thinking, changing your state. Okay. So now I want you to try something. Think of that thing again. Okay. And now I want you to push the image out. Push it out, all the way out, out, out. Make it small. Drain the color. If it's moving, have it be still. If it was thick, have it be hollow. And now move it all the way out and put it into a slingshot and just fucking move that picture away and just have it go into the ethers. Remove the sound, remove yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
First of all, how was that experience?
The second time felt less charged.
Yeah. Just changing a picture in your mind, moving it out, draining the color. A lot of times when people are overwhelmed, they see a lot of pictures and it's all near them, like this. So if you like, they have picture over picture over picture over picture, and it's called submodalities. It's
So we just take
literally
all the
called,
news articles, we make them
yeah,
tiny, and we
yeah,
fling
yeah,
them into the
and just
ether.
fling them. Yeah, exactly. And actually, Chris Hallbaum thought of this, right? She was like, anytime you have an intrusive thought, take it out, throw it out. And if the physical act of doing that, and she has a much more like deliberate process, but the vibe is to catch yourself. But just changing a submodality, the picture of how close it is or how far it is, can adjust your state of mind. can adjust your capacity to receive information, right? So when we get triggered, we have a lot of pictures and a lot of sounds that are automatic. It's in the middle part of our brain. It activates our basal ganglia, which is just like the activated part of our brain. Like it just, this is where you form habits. So to actually slow that down, to actually have awareness can make such a huge shift. And so the way that we can actually get awareness, if you catch yourself being really triggered, it's very hard to do, is to be like, whoa, let me just close my eyes. How close is this to me? Like sometimes when somebody says something that activates a wound for me, it's right in my face and it's huge. We'll shrink the image, shrink that image, push it further out, move it away, and then just get a sense. Do you have more resources?
I'm very interested in this visualization of the tiny news clips now. I'm like, I think that'll help a lot of people.
Yeah. So change and adjust your submodality. And a lot of people are very visual. Now, for example, if people are very kinesthetic like me, I'm a big feeler, just like feel all day long. I could live in emotion, right? I need to actually disassociate. I need to take a step back and just move it away from me. I feel so intensely that I actually just have to go push it all the way out.
Yeah.
I actually imagine that something's like inside of me and I just take it out and throw it. Like, and those little things can change the pictures in your brain and can change your submodalities because it requires presence and awareness to recognize something's wrong. I'm gonna adjust it. And a lot of times we don't know what to do when we feel triggered and we get on our phone and we fucking eat that chocolate and do that thing. But play with it. Play with your mind. Your mind is a fucking beautiful thing. If you can start just changing your submodalities, this will change your life.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful for people that are more tactile or visual to have a different way of doing it. It's an interesting mechanism. My wheels are turning. I'm processing as we're speaking. So I want to honor your time, but I'm sure we'll have you back at some point. Just so appreciative of the work you do and so applicable to what people are just struggling with right now, including myself. So thank you for taking some time out of your day to share your tools with us.
Oh my God. Thank you for creating the space, babe.
Will you tell everyone where they can find you?
My name, Amina Zamani, is my Instagram, is my website, is my LinkedIn. So
Great. We'll link some stuff in show notes so you have it, everyone. And thank you, Amina. Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Boulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you. See you next time.